1 Corinthians 15, verses 1 through 11. Now, brothers, I want to remind you of the gospel I preached to you, which you received and on which you have taken your stand. By this gospel you are saved, if you hold firmly to the word I preached to you, otherwise you have believed in vain. For what I received I passed on to you, as of first importance, that the Scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day according to the Scriptures, and that he appeared to Peter and then to the 12. After that he appeared to more than 500 of the brothers at the same time, most of whom are still living, though some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles, and last of all he appeared to me also, as to one abnormally born. For I am the least of the apostles, and do not even deserve to be called an apostle, because I persecuted the church of God. But by the grace of God I am what I am, and his grace to me was not without effect. No, I worked harder than all of them, yet not I, but the grace of God that was with me. Whether then it was I or they, this is what we preach, and this is what you believe. In recent weeks, I've been thinking about and pondering things that shape our lives, things that shape our nation, things that even shape our communities. As I was thinking about things that shaped our lives, I thought about many things like the Civil War, World War I, World War II, the Industrial Revolution, Vietnam, Desert Storm, and probably the most recent and continued is the 9/11 attacks and the war on terrorism. Those, along with other things, have shaped many individuals' lives. And many individuals and others too numerous to mention have helped to shape this nation into what it is today. Our personal lives are shaped by parents or absentee parents, by education, by many educators and things that have happened in our lives, by marriage, by children, even our employment, help to shape our lives. There are so many things in our lives that help to shape our lives for who we are. But there's two things that probably can help shape our lives more than anything else. Two things that have stood the test of time. They've helped to shape our nation. They've helped to shape us as individuals if we allow them to. And these two things are on the screen when Kathy punches the button. The cross and the empty tomb. Christians all around the world today are celebrating. They're celebrating the resurrection of Jesus Christ. They're celebrating the fact that Jesus is not any longer on the cross. And he's not in the tomb, but that he lives. And he's with us today. And he will go with us every day if we allow him into our life. And if we allow him to be a part of shaping our life. In 1991, in the midst of Desert Storm, Ruth received a devastating message. Her son, who was serving in Desert Storm, stepped on a landmine and was killed, was the message. Later she wrote, I can't begin to describe the grief and shock. It was almost more than I could bear. For 3 days I wept. For 3 days I expressed anger and loss. For 3 days people tried to comfort me to no avail because the loss was just too great. 3 days into that grief, the phone rang. The voice on the other end said, Mom, it's me. I'm alive. Ruth said, I couldn't believe it at first. But then I recognized his voice, and he really was alive. I laughed. I cried because my son, who thought was dead, was alive. Now, there's probably nobody in this sanctuary that knows the feeling that Ruth had when she got the call that her son was alive. We can't imagine what she was even going through when she got that call. But many of those in the New Testament scriptures that we read in that day that Jesus was found alive know what Ruth was feeling. Their lives had been shaped by Jesus. He was one that they had followed. This rabbi, they followed him for 3 years. They watched him perform miracles. They watched him change lives. They watched him help to shape many lives. And then one day, they watched as their best friend died on a cross. They watched as he was nailed to that cross. They witnessed the pain. They were there when Jesus said, I thirst. You hear that? They were there. That was helping to shape their lives and who they were. And then they heard the words, my God, why have you forsaken me? And then Jesus said, it is finished. Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. That was shaping their lives. But that wasn't the end. There was still more shaping to be done in their lives. And they watched as Jesus was taken off the cross. As Jesus was laid in a tomb, probably very hurriedly wrapped in cloth, because that was the time that they buried them. And they wrapped them in cloth. And they watched all their hopes, all their dreams put into that tomb, and the stone rolled across. Might Ruth have had some of the same thoughts when she found her son was killed? Thoughts of despair, thoughts of anguish, thoughts of what is happening. All the rest of that Friday, all day Saturday, into Sunday morning, they grieved and they mourned. And they thought, what is this? The one we loved, the one who helped to shape our lives, is in the tomb. Then early on Monday morning, or Sunday morning, the women went to the tomb. They were going to properly prepare his body for burial, because it was hurriedly done and it wasn't all done. And they were wondering, who's going to roll away the stone? And when they get there, probably still a little bit dark, and they're looking. The stone was already gone. And an angel appears to them and says, you're looking in the wrong place. You're looking in the wrong place. You're looking for Jesus among the dead. And he is not dead, he is alive. He lives. He is risen. He is risen. And that is what we can celebrate. That is what can help to shape our lives. When we realize that Jesus is no longer in the tomb, that he lives, he is risen, and he is here today. All of the evidence is in. And and we are convinced he is alive. What a difference his resurrection makes. How much different the disciples looked after the resurrection than they did after the death. How it helped to shape who they were. The chapter I read earlier from 1 Corinthians, some people thought Corinthians on Easter Sunday, but it's also called the Great Resurrection chapter. I want to read a couple of those verses again. Now, brothers and sisters, I want to remind you of the gospel I preached to you, which you received, on which you have taken your stand. By this gospel you are saved, if you hold firmly to the word I preached to you. Otherwise you have believed in vain. Now, Paul is writing to the church at Corinth. And he says, by this gospel you are saved. By this resurrection you are saved. And he's writing to the Corinthians, and he's writing to us. By this we are saved. For what I received, I passed on to you as of first importance. That Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day according to the Scriptures, and that he appeared to Cephas, then to the 12, and after that he appeared to more than 500 of the brothers and sisters at the same time, most of whom are still living, though some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James and to all the apostles, and last of all he appeared to me also. You hear that? Paul is writing to the Corinthian church to remind them that Jesus, yes, he died, he lived, yes, he died, but he is alive and he is risen. And then he talks about how Jesus appeared to so many others. More than we can see in this sanctuary, he appeared to. The evidence is in Jesus is alive. So as we think of that, think about having our lives shaped. Think about this time and how it shaped our lives. Think about the cross. Before the crucifixion, the cross was seen as an instrument of horrible death. It was a rough piece of wood. It was soaked in blood. It was so cruel that the Roman Empire would not allow Roman citizens to be crucified. It was only for slaves and enemies of the empire. But today we wear crosses. We carry crosses. We have crosses hanging on our walls. The reminder of God's love. One who was willing to go to the cross for us. And we think about the tomb. Before the resurrection, the grave was looked upon as the final chapter. The closing of the great door. The end of everything. But because of the resurrection, we can see that beyond death is where life really begins. You see, this time here on earth is just preparation for glory and being in glory and worshiping God. It's not the end. We're just passing through. So if we have this hope of resurrection, why do we so often worry about the material things? Why do we worry about all the things that we're trying to gather in our homes and all of that? Dale Evans once said, I spent most of my time searching for a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Then I finally found it at the foot of the cross. You hear that? Searched for it and finally found it at the foot of the cross. A pot of gold. You see, nothing you accumulate, nothing you own makes any difference. In the end, it's only the decision you have made about Jesus that counts. Is he in your life? He says, I am the way, I am the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. As Paul said, the things on this side of the resurrection are temporary. The things we cannot see are eternal. The resurrection should shape our life for glory. And then we have the transformation of life. If you listen to the message of the world today, there is no hope. You look at the papers and you don't find hope. You find all of the negative things that are happening in the world. It can fill you with despair. And if the only hope you have is what you find in the world, then you are lost. But Jesus said, I have come to bring you life and that more abundantly. Again, hope is not in the world. Jesus Christ and the resurrection are our hope. And then we have the transformation of death. Before the resurrection, death was the end. The final curtain call, as some would say. All of that could happen before the resurrection was mourning. Just mourning. But after the resurrection, we mourn because we've lost a loved one. But we can mourn as people who have hope. Hope of eternal life. Hope of reconnection after death in glory. Jesus overcame the grave. And after death, we can live. Carl was a very, very rich man who owned a great estate, much property. His favorite pastime was getting on his horse and riding out around his property and through the valleys and just congratulating himself on a job well done. And one day Carl was out riding. He was kind of going up out of the valley and he noticed Hans up on a hill, one of his tenant farmers. Hans was getting ready to eat. He had set his stuff out. And then Carl noticed Hans bowing his head and praying, thanking God for what he had. His lunch was a piece of bread and a slice of cheese. Carl rode up to Hans and looked at what he had and what he'd thanked God for, and he said, Hans, if that is all I had to eat, I wouldn't thank God. And Hans replied real humbly, it is enough, and I'm thankful God provided it. And Carl started to ride off. He was a little taken back by Hans's comment that he thanked God for it. But then Hans said, hey, I need to tell you about my dream, Carl. Hans said, I had a dream last night. It was a very beautiful scene. And then this voice said, the richest man in the valley is going to die tonight. He said, I heard it again, the richest man in the valley is going to die tonight. And Carl just kind of shrugged and rode off, thinking that Hans was a little delirious. But the words haunted him as he was riding back toward his house. And pretty soon his chest started to kind of feel like it was tightening up. And he started to feel like he wasn't very well. And he got back to the house and he thought about it a little bit. He called the doctor and he told the doctor about the dream that Hans had had. And he said, my chest is kind of tight and I don't feel very well. And the doctor said, well, I can come out and check you out. He said, I really don't think you have anything to worry about. And after the checkup, the doctor said, you're strong as a horse. And old Carl said, well, after Hans's words, I wanted to be sure. Because he said the richest man in the county, in the valley, is going to die tonight. And Carl went to bed and he felt assured that everything was just fine. But in the morning, Carl got up. And he got a message. Hans had died that night. Truly, the richest man in the valley died that night because he had Jesus Christ as his Lord and Savior. Toward the end of 1 Corinthians 15, Paul writes, "Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting?" You see, the resurrection makes all the difference. Things once important don't hold the same importance. Before, death was the end, but now it is just the beginning. Let the resurrection and the hope of Jesus Christ shape your life. Praise be to God. He is risen, and he lives. Listen to the words of this song. It's about the cross.